Good evening, everybody. Hello. Hello. I think it's just such a nice sort of intimate room and just the topic of discussion and everything tonight. We'll all just make it really nice and informal and welcoming. So I want you to feel comfortable, not just receiving the information, but to ask questions and to feel part of the event tonight. Thank you all for coming tonight. Belfast City Council, Queen's University Belfast, myself, Kate Conway, and our amazing panelists have come together to discuss the topic, does fashion have to cost the earth? This event is the first in a series of events organised by Queen's and Belfast City Council as part of the European Week for Waste Reduction, a multinational campaign to promote responsible consumption and encourage all of us to reduce our waste. The theme this year is circular fashion, so let's get on with it. Our panelists, yay, are all from very different backgrounds and each bring a unique perspective to the issue of sustainability in fashion and are very much leading change here in Belfast and beyond. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and just give us sort of a few minutes about who they are and what point of view they are coming from. We'll start with Alison Gault.
Thank you. Some of you know me. It's lovely to see some faces. I'm enjoying the knitting and on the front row because I'm at the moment I'm a senior lecturer in textile art design and fashion. At the moment I've been there for a long time, but prior to that I was a knitwear designer, so I worked in industry and I also worked as a freelance designer. Apart from my work with the students, I also work on research projects. Generally, they always have an element of sustainability or responsibility or responsible approach. And I'm very interested in fibres and constructed textiles. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Alison. And Kathryn?
So I'm Kathryn Timms, and I work with RAP. We're a climate impact NGO. We're working in the UK and 40 countries around the world, and we really focus on food, plastics, and textiles. So I'm responsible for our textiles program and working with businesses in the UK. Do you know a wee bit about why I'm interested in this? Really? So I mean, I've always been interested in clothes, and I like the fact that I get to do my sort of day job in this world. But I think one of the things we were talking about earlier was the amount of information that you hear about clothing, and one of the facts that just sticks in my head and I just find really, really shocking was that to make a t-shirt, the amount of water to make one t-shirt is equivalent to our drinking water for 3.5 years. And I just sort of thought, if we knew, if we understood sort of the amount of impact our soft, warm clothing has on us, we'd sort of think about it a wee bit differently. So I guess that's just what I was, it's one of the things that motivates me is like, how do we sort of get people to think differently about the lovely things that we wear and how we do it differently?
Well, we'll get everybody to think about it tonight. Let you think for thought. And to Laura.
Yes, so I'm Laura Steele. I'm a senior lecturer in business and society at Queen's Management School, where I also serve as the director of athletics responsibility and sustainability. A big focus that we have in the management school increasingly is around UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Principles for Responsible Management Education. So Principles for Responsible Management Education is a sort of child of the United Nations. It arose in 2007-2008 in the wake of the global financial crisis, where we had the horrible realization that in some business schools that we were sending people out less ethical than they actually came into us. And combined with the global financial crisis, that caused a real reckoning with a lot of business and management schools around the world in terms of what we were teaching our students and what kind of people we wanted to encourage them to be. So we look at things sort of across the teaching, the research, the organisational practices, and also the partnerships we've had in terms of sustainability. In terms of how I got interested in it, so I first started teaching at Queen's in 2014 on a part-time basis, and looking for different case studies. Whenever I started teaching, it was a year after the Rana Plaza disaster, which many people might one of those horrific incidents within not only within business generally, but specifically within the context of fashion, where, if you're not familiar with it, there was a building collapse in Bangladesh that resulted in over 1,000 deaths. And actually what many people don't realise is the number of injuries that were sustained and then the impact of that on those communities. I was so horrified by what I was reading, and to be honest, I can still close my eyes and see some of the images that I saw, that it really caused me to rethink my own relationship to fashion, and now I would regularly engage students by talking about issues in fashion. And we find it's one of the most useful ways to do it, because everybody has to wear clothes, and even if you're not particularly interested in the heights of fashion, you still have to go out and purchase clothing. And so that's why I sort of feel it's particularly important for us to think about.
You said it's a relationship.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and Becky and Connor.
So I'm Connor,
And I'm Becky.
and together we are Another World Belfast. We are very aware that is very Jedward, and we are here
Love it.
for it.
Yeah.
We run a local not-for-profit organisation that supplies direct aid and builds very practical projects for both our local community and with an emphasis on our planet. That looks like what we call the Love Pack programme, which is supplying toiletries and underwear in what we call Love Packs to people experiencing hardship. And also now the Free Store, which is essentially a clothing bank on steroids. We've taken all the sadness and solemnity away. We filled it with colour. It's run by rather the church, a bunch of gays, and we supply for women in our queer community the clothing and the accessories and the makeup and the things that people need, but also with a little bump for mental health to make you feel better leaving than when you first came in. We also have a store in the town called Stop Shop, which kind of powers it all, funds it all. We're very interested in being independent and being sort of sustainable within our own organisation. So that shop is essentially like a charity shop, but everything inside is £10, or it's £5 if you choose to swap your own clothes with us. So you can bring them in, they'll go through them, we'll give you some swaps for them, and you save a bit of money. You also keep our stock up, and we get the fundraise at the same time and help our local community.
I don't know how you get enough time to do that.
That took me about a week.
Yeah.
It was fully scripted, Kate.
Amazing.
You're doing that bit in future now, normally I have to do that bit, but that's brilliant.
Stop Shop, although I'm sure we'll hear more about it shortly, but where is it?
Out the back. We're in a nice crowd, in a nice area in the town, along with all the sex shops and everywhere else. We're out the back of Castlecourt, beside Smithfield, along a wee row of like independent record stores, and there's a incense shop. You can get spells done. We're in the middle. It is aggressively pink. It's filled with disco balls, and again, like with the Free Store, we try to just look at that type of model in a different way. We're trying to make sure it smells amazing, that the clothes are presented beautifully, that they're all on matching hangers, that when you come in, you're welcomed. That there's a bit of substance there. There's something to join. You know, you can come in, buy a coat, but then before you know it, you're packing tampons or sticking stickers or
We like to put customers to work.
Yes.
Yeah, don't stand still in our shop, you'll be given a job.
Show some love while we're there.
This is it.
Yeah. Often we have floor, a couple of floors above us, and then to be with the warehouse too, where the Free Store space, it's over West Belfast. But often we have just teams of volunteers helping us out and doing their bit. Our lovely friend and board member Stephen the other day described it as a sweatshop.
Stop saying that, you're going to ruin us.
This is a great model. And before Stephen was on our board, I was there for his jokes. Now I'm like, actually, stop it. Technically, yes. People are not getting paid.
But they are here mostly of their own volition.
And they can leave when they want.
Yes, you
Check out
can
those when they want.
be.
Yeah.
No, the old one.
Brilliant. We'll hear more about that shortly. So, sorry, you're very welcome. The global fashion industry is said to be the second most polluting after oil. It accounts for massive environmental damage during manufacturing, which mostly takes place in countries without the adequate infrastructure to manage the resulting environmental impacts. You're very welcome. Come on in. The impacts don't just stop after manufacturing. When we're finished with our clothes, where do they end up? The Clean Clothes campaign claims that 3 out of 5 of the 100 billion garments made in 2018 will end up in landfill. This presents huge challenges to our planet. A few years ago, we were all really concerned about plastic in the ocean, but now the spotlight is on fashion. At a time when budgets are squeezed and prices are rising, many rely on fast fashion brands to refresh their wardrobes, keep on top of trends and clothe their families, but these brands are often blamed for environmental damage and human rights infringements in the countries where the garments are made. This includes paying workers too little and making them work long hours. It can be easy to ignore these issues when they happen far away in places like China. If you think of companies like Shein, That right?
Perfect.
Shein.
Shame.
Shein. But in recent investigations found this was also the case with fast fashion brands operating right here in the UK, like Boohoo, who are based in Leicester. We only need to remember the Rana Plaza disaster, as you mentioned, in Bangladesh in 2013 to see how it can go wrong for so many. So what can be done to improve the environmental impact of our fashion choices? How can we as consumers make a difference for the better? And how will the fashion industry improve on a global scale? Now we get a chance to have our say and ask questions to the panel at the end. But to kick off, let's open the discussion with our speakers by first posing the question, does fashion have to cost the earth? More specifically, from each of you, obviously they all have a very different point of view, and I've sort of tried to kind of arrange them in my brain as the life cycle of a garment, right, from it being made to owning the purchase decision, to owning the garment, maintaining the garment, and then whenever you decide, you know, that it's time for us to part ways, what do you do with it? So we look at it kind of from that point of view, but obviously each speaker has their own expertise. So we want to ask, from your point of view, what's the one thing you wish we knew and why? And sorry, where's our prefix this by saying that I definitely feel a little bit uncomfortable with this discussion because I'm such a consumer. So if anybody else feels that way, that's okay. Don't ever feel that there's any kind of blame or any kind of feeling of, oh, I can't admit to that. I'm admitting it very openly. I have changed my ways. I'm taught to in vintage clothes tonight, but I know myself it's something that I really need to think a lot more about. So thank you in advance.
Yeah.
From your point of view, what's the one thing you wish we knew and why?
Well, I suppose, you know, I came from a generation where it was make do amend. My parents had lived through the war, especially my grandparents. Probably my mother was quite young, so everything was handmade, you know, when knitting here tonight, and a lot of it was very slow. So when, you know, I was growing up, I learned to make and to sew and to make my own clothes, or change from bell bottoms to drain pipes, back to bell bottoms, and do all that sort of thing and customize. And it was just a natural thing. So I suppose you know, for me, it's about knowing how to do that, about being mindful about what we're buying. We've all made mistakes, and we've all maybe had little, you know, errors of judgment or in our weaker moments and have bought things. And I think that we've all done that, whether that's clothing or whatever, you know. So
I say something also subconsciously. We've done
I
that.
was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's a case of know better, do better.
Yeah, and it's about knowing, doing, being, isn't it? You know, so being mindful and about slowing down even in our purchases. Now, when we, you know, like we talk to our students, we often use the why, what, where, when, how principles. You know, so why are you buying it? You know, who made it? What's it made of? Where has it come from? When are you going? You know, when are you going to change that? And how are you going to change it? So I think if you stop and start to think about those and question yourself, and I actually think it's really difficult for us because we're bombarded. We've got algorithms everywhere, algorithms on Insta, everywhere that are popping up things that we are quite weak about because it's kind of figured out all the things that we're looking at. So we are, you know, we are having to guard against that essentially. And I think that I wish people knew, to answer your question, how difficult it is to design something, the effort that goes into that designing, the thinking about, you know, the color, the selection, the process, the growing of the fiber, whatever that might be. And I know that as a designer, that's what I'm interested in. 80% of the non-waste and the sustainability decisions can be made at the design end of things. So the fiber that we choose and how that's grown, and I think we've lost touch with that. We don't really know where our fibers come from. We don't know the energy that's gone into growing that, the growers and what they've had to go through. And we talked about 2,700 litres, which is equivalent to 900 days of drinking water. So that's phenomenal, isn't it, when we start to think about it? And I think the plastic issue also, you know, when we start to think about, well, okay, so we've got these super technical fibers, but they're all soaking into our river systems and into our seas and carrying toxins with them and then polluting all our wonderful wildlife, you know. So I think I wish people knew the effort and energy that went into the design and the production and the whole supply chain to not wear it 7 times and get rid of it, I suppose.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison. And Kathryn?
I suppose just moving on from that, so you've got, as Alison said, about with the 80% of the impact comes through that design and that production stage, but there's a huge part of the life of our clothing that and the carbon footprint that's part of how we care for our clothing, how we make it last longer, and how we look after it. So there's lots of sort of quite practical things we can do to extend the life of our clothing. And I think, but I think in terms of then, when you know that all that impact has gone into a new item of clothing, you start to look at pre-loved clothing in a slightly different way. And the one thing that I would love everybody to know is your measurements for your body. Because actually, when you're trying to buy pre-loved, you sort of need to know what your shoulders are and your hips are, because brands change their sizing every couple of years. So something that you love from a particular high store, if you're finding it in a charity shop or you're finding it in Vincent or Depop a couple of years ago, it might not be the same. So all those measurements that sort of people are putting up, it's like, if you know your measurements, you can make a really practical difference to how much you can actually access. So yeah, I know it's a bit slightly off. It's like, but
That's a good
the
one.
next sort of like stage is like, okay, how can we be practical? It's like, know your measurements so you can actually access some of the stuff, because if you don't know that, it's all a bit scary.
Building actually on what you just said, I wish people knew the human impact of how a lot of their clothes are manufactured. So obviously I said I was deeply affected by what happened at Rana Plaza. If you're not familiar with it, I would say go and watch some of the videos on YouTube. Every year I wrestle with myself, should I show these to students, because they are so horrific. And obviously there's a number of people that died, but there were people who were left incredibly physically injured as a result of that. Remember, there's a saying that I read years ago that if abattoirs had windows, the world would be vegetarian. And I think that if a lot of people were really aware about the extent of the conditions in many factories around the world, about the the health impact of some of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of the dyes and the equipment that people are being exposed to, the very, very poor rates of pay, because many businesses have chased the cheap needle around the world to go to countries where there are very, very weak labour standards and where there are very weak health and safety standards. And I'll talk about this possibly later, but the fashion industry to date has been working its own homework. And I think it's about time that governments around the world and also consumers started to work the homework of the fashion industry, particularly around both the environmental, but the social and the labour issues around it. But just while I remember to pick up on something that you said, so that my other big area of interest is around artificial intelligence, and it would scare people, I think, if they knew the amount of effort that's being put into predictive analytics, that's being put into the use of artificial intelligence in marketing. And so again, just to say to people, it's really understandable why, if you're spending time on social media, if you're signing up for mailing lists and so forth, those have been engineered with the greatest of precision to try and make things look appealing to you, to encourage you to buy. And so it's very, very hard not to get drawn into that. So my two things would be, firstly, I wish people would know about the human impact of their clothes. And secondly, I wish they would know what businesses are trying to do in order to make that particular sale.
Mine is, I suppose, a personal one. I read recently, we always talk about the concept of the opposite of more is not less. The opposite of more is enough. And that is something that we really try and live by. But then I read recently, you get all these like phrases shared on social media and all the rest of it. One I read recently said the opposite to courage is not cowardice. The opposite to courage is conformity. And that really, really rang true with me, because like I'm 42 and my life is very different now in the past 5 years than it was in, like, it's not really in your 40s that you can think of yourself in like different decades and generations. Well, at that time, when I worked there, I was more like that. And I think I went through my whole life to an extent, maybe not so much the early part of my life, but certainly the middle section between my mid-20s to my 30s, trying to kind of conform or fit in or be accepted or whatever that looks like. And I suppose the older that I've got, the more I've been able to look around me and realize that actually the key to feeling like you belong or that you fit in is not trying. And that means wear what you like, do what you like, don't listen to any criticisms, don't care about what brands are doing or what people are telling you is a style or a trend or whatever. The more I witness it, the more I can see that the inverted commas coolest people don't give a shit. They wear what they want, they have their own sense of style, and even if they don't have what they perceive as somebody else's, you know, they're very stylish. Just by choosing what you like and wearing what makes you feel comfortable and what makes you feel like yourself, having purple hair or having grey hair, whatever you choose, that gives you a sense of calm, and it means that you can step away from the bombardment that we constantly receive through social media, through brands, through all of those things. And in this world where many people are struggling with their mental health, with who they are, what's their purpose, is this job, you know, fulfilling something? Like, at the end of the day, if you can try your best to find comfort in yourself and how you choose to express yourself without just switching off what you care about brands and being told what is the right thing or the wrong thing, then you ultimately become a more happy person. And then by doing that, then that also allows you to go in and shop secondhand and, you know, find treasures that maybe aren't part of whatever the latest trend is, because they were maybe from 6 years ago or 2 years ago or whatever. But if you like it, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And the more the people, you know, it used to be maybe that people that were a bit more eccentric was, you know, there was a bit more of a, oh, they're a bit weird, a bit different. Now, if we have to do a lot of research for what we do, we regularly will watch YouTube and we'll see street style and all the rest of it. Now, whenever you put on street style, whether it's from Vice or whatever the broadcaster is, I can guarantee you, no matter what city that they're in, everybody that they've chosen looks amazing, and at least 50% of what they're wearing is reloved or it's secondhand. You know, that is the more, it's the cooler choice now as well, and it doesn't require any necessarily style tips or anything like that to do it. So I think the thing that I wish that I'd known whenever I was in my 20s or younger was stop trying, you know, stop trying to go with, what is it, the phrase that said that the opposite to courage is conformity. Even a dead fish can go with it.
I would have pointed whatever you had, because that's just exactly. Over the head. I'll pick up on that shortly.
It's like 50% vodka, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got the wrong glass.
It's really hard to follow that in fairness to everything that you guys said, of course. That's what I was thinking and what I was going to say.
I think there's a few more words in there, don't there?
I would say so.
Yes.
Just in the sort of the sector that we're in, the thing that I would love. What was the question?
What do you wish people knew?
So I wish that more people within the third sector that support it knew that that top that says "you go girl" or whatever it is made by a woman and potentially their child around the corner from Rana Plaza in Bangladesh or Gault, where now where it's cheapest and the labour laws are the worst. I wish people do that, and there was a little bit more boutique for that. It's not that much more expensive to, well, it's sometimes like 3 or 4 times more expensive to invest in something that is somewhat more trustworthy. Like we were talking about this before, you never really know. It's very hard to get into where the stuff comes from, and recently we've made the decision to just stop producing new stuff when it comes to clothes or t-shirts and things like that. We're going to be using all pre-loved or second-hand, or whatever you want to say. Just so that we can settle that in ourselves and our integrity. But I wish people knew that, and I wish also people could take the information on. You know, even my reaction to you and what you said there was very like my laser reaction is like, oh, that's a bit much, you know. And actually, when it comes to it, we should be able to hear something new, know that we're not being attacked for being wrong. It's just new information, and we can change our minds. You know, we can think, actually, yeah, that's right. And then it opens up the conversation that it doesn't then become that you're being attacked. It becomes that we're sitting having an adult conversation as, you know, developed human beings to say, well, actually that thing you do, or that thing that you wear, or that brand, that Shein, actually, let me send you a video on that, or let's talk about that. For then that person to reply, and not in a, well, you're wearing DM bits, and DM bits are made by God knows how. You know, it's then a reply of, yeah, well, actually, I was thinking about this. You know, it's a slightly more I suppose there's more of an openness to kind of taking that information on board, and then also taking that to whoever, it's your mum or your dad or community to say, actually, maybe we should think about that a bit more. You know, really years ago, I did an internship in Indonesia with a brand called Indosol, and they take tires and they make them into shoes. They're really wonderful, and they have a lot of community projects that I was most interested in. But at the time, they were trying to go for a big order, or sorry, for a big shipment, and they were running quite late. So a lot of it, I ended up in the factory tying laces, and it was wonderful. I made loads of friends. But at the same time, it really struck me that like somebody ties these laces, like
A human.
so, like, and actually in that factory, fantastic conditions. But in the one next door, once you're there for a while, and even as a white Western massive gay boy, you can still gain a little bit of trust. People sort of see it, they know you're about, they know you're trusted, and then before you know it, you're in next door, and you're there with the same people tying laces for X brand that are there with their family, that are not at school or are not able to access the same things as maybe other kids would like. It's that really sort of opened up my mind that actually, like you were saying, it's someone has to make the things. It's not some magic. I sort of just imagined it was all just some machine, like you just feed in a load of stuff, and then the next thing there's a pair of knights. No, there's some sorry person that has to melt that soul and press it on, you know, and that person by the end of their day, never mind the end of their working life, have destroyed those muscles, and then we don't have medical insurance or can't access that help or whatever it is. You know, those fumes are really affecting in a way that you wouldn't have thought of. But next thing, you know, such and such is down wherever, you know, the Ulster Sports Club, and they've got the lovely lights on, and they're just gorgeous, and you got actually really good things for them. You know, it's not thinking really truly where stuff came from, and it seems so obvious, but it's pleasing. You know, it really makes you reevaluate.
Just the expression I had there, I just went, because I put a new pair of trainers on at the weekend and everybody admired
Oh, I
them,
see them on
and
Instagram. The
got
reason why I mentioned it.
a really good deal on those as
Well,
well.
shame on you.
30%. But that's the thing. I am very open about the fact that I am a consumer. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about doing this tonight was because I know, but it's in the distance.
Yeah.
It's something that's not right in front of me, as you say. It's human beings, but I can't see them. So it's important now, as I say, and I confess that to you, so we all kind of are all like an even message here. But can I ask, I'll ask first. Does anybody have a comment about anything in the speaker said or anything they want to ask it?
It's quite interesting. I think there's a generation gap because when I was a student, a lot of us still worked in factories, but we don't have these factories anymore. Because when you said somebody's tying laces all day, I was folding cardboard boxes all day and doing other stuff on the machine. And also there were still textile factories here, but it's more gone. And I think that's where the connection is lost. We've all exported all those jobs elsewhere where they can be, you know, where they're done cheap and you have no trade unions and no proper laws. And I think that I'm just thinking, yeah, I still remember lots of people making clothes. I was an 80s girl and we all made our clothes because that was the fashion at the time. And I was running around sewing Rara skirts and all this kind of thing. And I think we were more aware of making things in how long. And it's only like 20, it's only like 20 years or something where this is completely shifted.
I also think there's a real connection to your clothes if you've made them yourself, you know, so if you've created something for and somebody's given you that as a present, or you've made it yourself and you've understood the effort, you know, at the cost, obviously, to buy materials and your effort going into that. I think there's that emotional attachment to whatever that thing is, that product, whatever that is. And I do think that is something that generationally, I know, because I'm obviously working with this generation, that they are more than ever, they're wanting those skills, more than ever, they've got such an awareness. And it gives me such hope, actually, that they're the drivers behind that. I came from a generation where I was taught that coming up. They've removed it. Our educational system needs change because they've removed it from primary school and secondary school to a certain extent. It's sort of demeaned, I think, and it's aligned to women's work. And it was lost in the mid-90s where they decided to send it to the Kathryn, you can know more about that, but I lived that and I saw a lot of the spinning. Look, think of the spinning here in Ireland. we had a lot of spinning companies. We do have some, you know, but not the way it was. And I watched them go from the UK as well. And I think that a lot of people were entrenched in textiles, and it gave them great.
money. My aunt,
It was good money, yeah.
and she did the piecemeal bits, you know, the
Yeah.
quicker you were, the more money you get.
Yeah, it was, and it was, you know, and I think there's always a tension there as well, because you think of these people and the ethics, you know, the ethical, you know, I think it's Field Safi and Money from People Tree, and you think of what's happening. You were talking about Rana Plaza. I remember, you know, talking to students before that 100 years ago, exactly the same thing happened in the New York, you know, garment district, where the building went on fire and they were jumping out of it. So this is all, it's just history repeating itself, and we're just moving the problem or whatever. The issues are, if you take that, you know, when it's gone from, I don't know, where is it now? Vietnam has it gone to, wherever it is, you know, as he moved away from China, because China's at that tipping point. Some companies have come back and are manufacturing here, certainly in knitwear. They brought knitwear back as cheaper actually at the moment. So, but the thing is, you know, it's how do we, you know, change that? How do we lock into that? How do we, you know, bring this generation to that point where there's new skills maybe are out there. There's new, you know, areas for types of manufacturing. To go around to see a lot of the fibre to fibre manufacturing processes that are there, and the skills are here. There is a remnant here, you know, the machinery is here, and you know there are people that are really interested in looking at that and heritage side of it as well. So I do feel hopeful about that.
Anybody else? Any comments or anything before I move on?
And then straight here and now it's moved far away. Is there something that we need to look at policy and government level to say, do we want to be importing all of this? Do sort of manufacturers need to look at production? They've been allowed, I suppose, in a way, to create billion garments a year or whatever the figure is now. And that's generating then the sell it, so we're pushing us, then that turns into a waste product, which then turns into another problem, which then possibly exported to another country, Africa. You know, so we're actually moving our well-traveled items that you'll ever, and you just wonder, is there something in terms of legislation that we can't do touch on this? Is there working with these big brands? Is there the elephant in the room? Let's trust that's our mantra. That's what you brought down. But you know, is there an opportunity where we have to say stop? We cannot keep producing millions and billions of items every single year.
It's like that
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
What's the opposite to more? It's enough.
Capitalism is insatiable. That's one of the key points, is that within this system of growth, and like, let's face it, the UK government is run by the Conservatives. Here, I'm not even going to comment on here. That's a that's a particular one. But you know, if you look at Invest NI only want to talk to you if you're interested in export. You know, we haven't learned from the pandemic about our supply chains going mental. Whenever the ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal screwed up all of our supply chains, you know.
Just in time.
We haven't learned about being able to, like, and this is not a, you know, in the third sector, we get very nervous if anybody saying, you know, take care of our own first. We are not those people in any way, shape. But whenever it comes to things like food, you know, we were actually listening to a beautiful podcast last night with the President of Ireland and Blind Boy, and they were talking about that.
Oh.
Amazing, you know. But it's, you know, it's getting this being pummeled by messaging thing as well. You know, we're obsessed with growth. We're obsessed with, like, everybody's a brand, you know. And whenever it comes to, look at our high streets, you know, look at our city centres. You know, I had a conversation with a guy last week about how he's a small business. He's trying to do retail with stuff that he is. It's a niche, but there's a market in that niche. He can't get a premises in Belfast City Centre at the minute because the rents are exorbitant, the rates are exorbitant, and you know, it is only worth attracting big high street brands into it. And then we have a reliance on big high street brands, and there's a place for them. There is, but where are the boutiques? Where are the butchers, you know, in Dunmurry we used to have two, now we have none, you know, and like for a vegan, I still like, I still stand for like, for high streets, you know, and for the richness that that brings. And we are in this such extreme place now, where if it's not, if you can't afford like a couple of 100,000 a year and you're prepared to be exporting $1 million a year, Invest NI aren't interested in talking to you. You know, what about the, and then yes, there's business plans available, and there's go for it schemes and all the rest of it, but what about just like actual support for the makers that want to come up, you know, and just to be something very practical support, like a space that exists that you can, you know, and not St. George's Market, because it's locked and loaded. Do you know what I mean? Like there is like an interim space that is required that isn't being met at the minute, where people that I can think of on probably one or two hands, and I can think of a lot because we are market traders, so we spend a lot of time with people that are starting their own organizations. But after you've done a market, you can trade at markets for a certain amount of time. After that, you need a storefront, you know, and unless you're like us and you have a not-for-profit and you can, you know, work in different ways and it helps with funding and all the rest of it, there's very little out there for people. It seems to be either you are a market seller or you're a £1 million a year business, and there's not really anything in between.
I'm sure, I know your students, leave, I love both of you guys, students, leaving, and I'm not saying I'm sure, I know, because I've had so many conversations, that actually, once you're out the door, unless you've got a bit of money behind you, unless daddy's ready to give you his card, no matter if that's your relative or somebody you met in a club some night, it's unless you've got someone to back you financially, it's really, if you're out into the wilderness, you know, you've got your degree, you've got the skills you've got, but you really need to gain experience and actually to build a brand now. Some of our friends that have fashion brands and did that many years ago, it's starting to happen for them 20 years on, you know, 20 years of like, worrying that you're going to lose everything, you know, or that you'll be on the street or whatever else it is, you know, if you don't have that behind you, it seems impossible, you know.
Like even in our schools, you know, like I went to Methody, and basically I remember being in those conversations, career conversations, where I was being pushed strongly away from anything that was art related, anything that was creative. Oh no, the focus has to be, do you want to get into law? Do you want to get into academia? Do you want to get into business? I'm like, okay, STEM. Oh, there you go. But you know, like that's something that still exists within our society. You know, it's kind of like but then who makes movies? Who makes fashion? Who makes art? Who doesn't sleep? You know what I mean? There's something that is like majorly going wrong, and that thing is our obsession with output and money. And then let's face it, greed. You know, it's our losing the ability to understand like what is the concept of enough. If we just want to live a comfortable life, want to go on a wee holiday, live in a house that is big enough for us, and want to have a business, it's actually really like doesn't exist anymore. You know, it's very, very hard for
That's fancy. That is like
Yeah.
you're heating on and you're made of money. You know.
Another thing, so I want to talk about the kind of law and policy side of things, but one of the things that I wrote down whenever I was preparing for this is I know some people trying to make it into the fashion industry, and as you heard, there's the financial capital side of things, but there's huge social and cultural capital issues, and the people that tend to make it, I think, often have some level of connection within the industry just to get through the door, but you also often need to do unpaid internships. And so again, as you say, if you don't have daddy's credit card, whoever that daddy is, then you could potentially not be in a position to take advantage of those. But in terms of my background before I came to Queen's was I worked in sort of legislation and policy, and I do have a really strong belief that there needs to be more regulation around this, that businesses and that there will be this kind of race to the bottom, and unfortunately we've seen that. And also, sometimes the system incentivizes bad behaviour and disincentivizes good behaviour, and it's really hard for those businesses that want to be ethical, that want to be sustainable, when you're competing against the Sheens of this world. Sheens of this world. If I get nothing else, I just try to pronounce that word. So, and then I don't know whether you read it, that there was, if you read the Fixing Fashion report in 2019, so if you haven't read it, it's a really, really good report. It came out of the UK Environmental Audit Committee, and you can just feel the passion with it. It's incredibly critical of the fashion industry, despite coming out of a government, effectively government or part of the UK House of Commons, and it really does a great analysis of the social, environmental, and economic impacts of fast fashion. They made some quite radical suggestions. So one of them that made a lot of the headlines was that they want to put a penny on every single garment sold, and that money would then be taken and it would be reinvested in sort of the end part of the supply chain and the end part of those use of those garments, and collecting in materials in a better way, finding better opportunities to reuse them. Probably would have fit really nicely with what RAP is aspiring to. Unfortunately, that was not brought forward. They made many other recommendations about like extending kind of supplier due diligence in relation to those supply chains and how things are manufactured. And again, almost none of the recommendations actually came into force, which is an incredible shame. What is good news, or I think it is good news, at least as a step forward, is that the European Union is taking many different things forward, including we're waiting to hear at the end of this month that the European Union is going to make some recommendations, which are hopefully going to be translated into regulations around effectively greenwashing, around sustainability claims, because at the minute it is the Wild West. You can pretty much attach the word green, eco-friendly, good for the planet, and you can put that on everything. Ideally, you want to slap it with some nice images of oceans, streams, beaches, the sky, and you can get away with saying effectively whatever you want. You could say 50% more recycled, textiles in this, but it might only be 2% to start off with. So I think that we're going to hopefully see some changes coming in as a result of the European regulations, which will probably have some extraterritorial reaches given the size of the European market. It's not perfect, but it's something. And so that's one of the things that I am excited to see what is going to happen there, because I think it's not going to be enough, and we've seen just so many failures in terms of self-regulation that I think that we need higher levels of regulation from individual governments, but also from these big sort of international powerhouses like the European Union that can actually affect change around this. And now I will step down from my soapbox on the importance of regulation.
This is a company that's not, it's great, but it's not entirely good. There's slivers of hope in the middle of this. There's the modern slavery legislation. And the new modern slavery commitment, so businesses are starting to start reporting on their ethical practices. So I mean, these are all drivers which are sort of pushing around the border agendas. It's actually starting to come through the polluter pays, the EPR. Can't remember the film and producer responsibility. And it's not addenda. It's just coming slowly, probably too slowly for any of us, but it's on its way. So there's quite a lot going on, I suppose. And we just had COP27, and I think he's going to have to really step back. I mean, you're talking about government doing more, but the way it's all set up, it's like the UK is worried about its own carbon emissions, and that's what it's committing to in COP27. But because so many of the emissions associated with clothing are offshore, that doesn't matter. That doesn't tick a box for UK government. They have no incentive to actually reduce the amount of clothing. The only bit that they're worried about is stuff going to landfill, because that's the bit they actually have to deal with here and now. So in some ways, it's all slightly warped, and I, do not put this reporting elsewhere, but it's like, but it's like, it is all slightly warped in terms of what the drivers are for government, but I totally agree that it needs to, there's only so much the leaders and the pioneers and the sustainability innovators and the, entrepreneurs can do, and you need there'll be those that just won't do it, and you need the government to stick to them and move it on. So yeah, absolutely agree, it needs to be part of the mix, because it's too big to solve.
I was interviewed by BBC, I think, after the 1 penny tax, and I'm paying 5p in a bag, which is now up to what, 20 or 25p, and you're putting a penny on a garment,
Yeah.
It should be far more than that. I mean, I just think the true cost of clothes is far more than we're paying, and we need to pay that, whatever that is. That needs to be, bring it back on shore if we're making it here. It just needs to be dearer and not cost you, and I think in terms of internships, I'm constantly asked by wonderful companies like Victoria Beckham and Alexander McQueen and all of these super companies that are very enticing to students to go for an internship. For what? For buttons, for nothing, for a lunch and maybe some travel money every day. And who can afford that? Who can afford that? Rich people.
Yeah.
So you're actually back to only allowing a certain number of people with it. And do we want that for our society? No, I think there's a real societal issue there. I think there needs to be legislation. There was an FOI came around, and there was a journalist who was doing some good work on that. And I always say to students, if you're going to get something out of it and don't do it 1 3 months, but if you're going to get something out of that, it's going to be beneficial to you, and you might have an aunt or an uncle, but actually that's an unsustainable model, and really we should not be promoting that at all. And generally, it's not fair. I just think the whole thing sinks naturally, and I think that needs to be.
So just heard two pieces of legislation, which one piece of legislation that I was marginally involved in, which was the legislation around the tax on bags and the Northern Ireland Modern Slavery Act, and see the amount of resistance before those were introduced. People going, oh my goodness, putting this charge on plastic bags, nobody will want to pay it. And suddenly with modern slavery, there's a lot of pushback from businesses. But it's funny that once that legislation passes, the mindset shifts, and it's a move towards
Oh, you're going to ban smoking, what? Or seatbelts, I remember that one. You have to wear seatbelts, but it's beneficial. Yeah, I think we need to try forward to change.
To answer just so many questions, especially in the space that we can work within, is the universal basic income. If we could give that to everyone that needs it, or to everyone, then it could solve a lot of those kind of questions. Like, you would kill to step into the Queen's space, or you would kill to go to where Victoria Beckham makes her garments, but it's getting there, and even the travel that's paid for, there will be a bit on top of that, but you have to live somewhere. Then if you're reliant on that aunt and uncle, there's a power imbalance that we're introducing with young people, which probably isn't very healthy. If the government could just support us,
Like that, referring again to that podcast we listened to in the last couple of days, that was one of the things that was said, is that there are certain basic inalienable human rights, like housing, safety, food, security, education. Those things should be available to all, and I know that with loans and things like that, in theory, but they're just not. There's a whole big wealth of other bits. Like we're friendly with Lucinda Graham, and she's talked about just the materials that are needed for students to study something like fashion. There's a cost to all of that. Yes, you can use waste and all the rest of it. Then you have a travel budget to go and pick that up. And it's like there are certain things that we should, just as a society, we should be taking care of. But a lot of these things, and there's also schools of thought that says that things like universal basic income structure and universal basic services actually can be really progressive. That if they're held outside, if certain things are held outside the market to provide. They were talking about grain and wheat have been allowed to be, considered an asset and can be then traded on the stock exchange. So then what's happening with that is it's being held in silos to influence the price of the market that's based on supply and demand. That sort of thing is like frightening to hear about whenever you hear it in the news. It just happened. And it's the same thing with education and with creativity, and that is having the opportunity to be creative. We sadly as a society we hammer that out of kids in their teens, or even in their early 20s. Again, the example was made, as a child picks up a worm and just looks at it and thinks, wow, that's amazing. But at what stage does the child have that slapped out of their hand? Oh, that's disgusting, don't do that. It's like, where does that wonder and that creativity disappear? And it's often where the point at which you change, and you have to work and you have to bring in money to be able to sustain yourself and feed yourself and things like that. But how much of a happier world and a more joyful world and a creative world would we be if we had our basic needs taken care of, and then we could enjoy things like fashion as a self-expression rather than another sort of like quite maniacal step on a rat race type of form. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Just as a sidebar, sorry for that, for Mike D. Higgins interview, he sounds a lot like he's a character in a fairy tale. You listened to it in the bath last night, and it sounded like you were listening to some like beautiful theatrical production. It's just the way that he sounds, but it's the way that he speaks. Oh my gosh,
Highly recommend that.
It's gorgeous. Anyways, blind boy.
So I want to bring it back to sort of a more individual basis in terms of all of us sitting here tonight. I know I feel very motivated, especially Becky. You had just the
Oh,
whole
the dead fish, was it?
It's the dead fish.
Yeah.
I'm a dead fish.
Non-conformist.
I'm coming to life and I'm thinking, okay, I know that I'm all into it now. And when I leave the room and I go home and I pick up my phone, Instagram's on, it's gonna be all shiny, sparkly things at me again. How do I, or what are the tips that you can give us to help us when we go back into the real world? And it's, as you said, the bombardment, how to step away from the bombardment and to make better choices, to make different choices.
It's doing the notifications of phones, you know, and I think it is that what, where, when, how, why do I need this? Do I need this? Am I, you know, what's the purpose for it? And absolutely be more mindful about why, you know, rather than just saying, whatever, I'm going to buy that. You know, I think it is that thinking about who has made that, you know, what's that, and how I can make a difference. You know, what's the difference I can make that difference by making good decisions, you know, and one of those good decisions for me, you know, because everybody's individual circumstances are different. Some of us can do some embroidery on our stains, you know, and that's where embroidery was invented, wasn't it? Beading, all of that too. So some of us can do that and are able to change our, you know, our clothes or adapt them. Or some of us are very good at clothes together. Some of us aren't so good. So how do, you know, it's up to each individual, I think, in a way to answer that, but to question why you're doing it.
When you send turn off your notifications, that's something I looked into at the start of the year, a challenge where you don't buy any brand new clothes for a year. And whenever I read those words, I admit my skin went a bit funny and I was like, because this was a brand new concept to me, and especially in the industry that I work in, I have to, you know, there's pictures of me will be on Instagram or whatever, and I am aware of the fact that I don't want, so I just post less pictures of myself on as part of it. It's like, you know, but if I host an event and I have a very sparkly dress that's very stick, then if I'm hosting something sort of a week later, I don't want to wear the same one again, so just alternate them. But anyway, whenever I was looking into that challenge of not buying anything new for the year, one of the tips on the site that kind of was promoting it was about turning off, unsubscribing from the mailing lists, not following them, the different brands. I know this sounds really obvious, but that really blew my mind because I hadn't realized how many. And then like when I go in and look at my emails, and it's, you know, anywhere you've bought anything from online or even in the store now, because when they send you the email receipt, you're on their mailing list, and then they're just sending you more and more and more. But I just put all spam, whatever. But every so often the subject is there's 20% off between 7 and 9 tonight, and I'm like, right, set my alarm because I'm thinking, but it's not things that I need. And this is where, you know, I feel like I definitely need some kind of almost like when I used to attend slimming clubs, that kind of support to just kind of to change my mindset. And I don't think I'm alone.
It's like, you know, you talk about the supply chain, reduce that supply chain, you know, see what are the students doing, what's local, what's, you know, what's available on second hand, you know, what's even more available in your own wardrobe. That's, yes. You can really reduce the supply chain, and I think that's really important because that's going to impact across, isn't it? You know, where's it coming from? And shame. Shame.
I call shame from ballerina.
We're going to cease and desist by the time this ends. It's like direct from China, we just stop it. We're not shame, we're shame.
And unfortunately, it's gone from being fast fashion to what? Ultra fast fashion.
Yeah.
Well, no, we talk about that, and it's like, it's going the wrong way. What's happening? You know, so I think it is that, and that's not easy because we could change our habits. It would be wonderful, but I think even small steps like that.
But you identify the triggers that make you buy something.
Yeah.
So it could be that,
it's
I'm going
like brainwashing. Actually, when you think about it, I mean, there used to be, I mean, years ago when you know, films and you went to the pictures, like, you know, it was a new thing. They had that subliminal advertising, so ice cream like in a second, and then when the interval came, guess what? Everybody wanted an ice cream. I think it's you know, it's in plain sight now. It's
That's what ASOS means. That's what it started out. Its name means a single screen. You know, it's sort of like there was a reason they just kept reproducing what was around and making it very accessible. Yeah, anyway, it's what you were sort of saying about like I like fashion. I think fashion's fun. I think you wouldn't know it from looking at me, but I do think clothes are fun, and they're such a part of our identity. And there's an emotional attack. I'll tell you about my t-shirt in a minute. And you know, there's an emotional connection to our clothes. You know, we have things that we,
100%.
and you know, you can't undermine that. And the research shows that you get such a dopamine hit by taking something to the till. And actually, it's almost gone by the time you put it in the bag. But there's that, it's a chemical reaction. It's like an addiction. It's happening in your brain in terms of buying. Like, there's no doubt about that. So I think it's baby steps. I think there's finding out more about the different types of new business models that are out there. So whether it's rental, whether it's subscription services, whether it is things like Vinted and Depop, like the online apps. I'm a certain shape, and I find going into secondhand shops and charity shops in the real world really quite depressing. So, but I know that I have a market that I can go online and I can look at Depop and Vinted and those sorts of things. So it's
Expand it more for anybody who isn't aware of the rental and Vinted and explain what it's on.
so there's lots of different things. I think we're sort of familiar with renting for formal occasions, like you might have, you know, had a wedding attire, or you might have had a suit, sort of those things, or maybe even renting ski wear if you were going on a nice posh holiday. But rental sort of the sort of thing that's coming down to be a bit more accessible for lots of different things. Folks, you might have heard of the Little Loop. So they have a children's clothing subscription service, and you've seen some of our high street stores and partner up with folks that specialize in rental. So like Marks and Spencer's and Higher Street, they're bringing out their Christmas collection. So if you need that sequin sparkles,
So you can hire from where? From Marks and Spencer?
you can hire from Marks and Spencer's. You can hire from some of these. You can hire from some of the brands that either you like and love. So they're bringing out their Christmas collections for this rental. So lots of different things in that space. So just do a wee bit of digging around and see what you can find. And you might have an aspiration if you love clothes to wear a particular designer. You can probably rent that. I have some colleagues who have rented their holiday clothes for going on holiday because they didn't want to invest in summer clothing because you get to wear it for 2 days in Northern Ireland. So you know, they basically rented their wardrobe for going on holiday. Yeah, there's just lots of new things which are sort of coming online, and I think it's trying to find the one that suits you. You know, like for me, I just find Depop or Vinted are essentially online apps that allow you to sort of like peer-to-peer resale, so you can sell your clothes. So if you're looking for a bit of cash, it's like pass on the things that you aren't able to wear anymore. I mean, this is like 90% of the reason we pass it on is because it doesn't fit. But the second largest reason is we just don't like it anymore. We're just a bit bored. So
we're
you know,
to get the dopamine hit, and then we're like,
exactly. So you know, it's like, you know, in our cost of living crisis, it's like pass it on and make some money and pass it on, and sort of, you know, be able to invest in that sort of, you know, if you need your dopamine hit, if you need for that occasion. I mean, let's face it, the world, you know, we do sort of, you know, we're not all going to stop buying everything, and we're not going to turn into adjustable clothing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, I think find the thing that works for you. Find the thing that makes it easy to take baby steps to transition. You know, it's like, I don't think I could do no clothes for a year, to be truthful. I think I'd have to take baby steps to get there. So I think it's finding those sorts of things. So yeah, and I think people are sort of 60% of people say that they're interested in secondhand, but a similar number also doesn't know all the different options which are out there. So I think shopping around, do a bit of research, figure some of this stuff out for you, you know, and just rent, don't buy, borrow, swap, all those different things.
You just lick it. Really.
Well, if you do have everybody with a really good wardrobe, why not?
Hit him where it hurts. Stick it up, always have a clean dress, and bump it up.
So work out the 6 months. So I think basic style. Yeah, so I think there's things you can do this would make it easier on your pocket, but also enjoy your clothing. You know, it's not miserable things in the world.
is anybody using Depop or Vinted or any of the resale sites yet? Yes. Good experience with it so far.
Probably the only thing is like the convenience of, I used to be a big Excel shopper, and it's convenient to get something kind of. So if you're just like send it back, it's so much harder to do that with second hand.
So it goes back to the first thing of know your measurements.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure you know what you're buying.
And to be fair, it's probably stopped me buying more things I need. It's quite a lot of stuff I need because like it's due back to the month that kind of thing. Whereas now I'm like really conscious of making sure, right, am I going to get rid of that? It's going to be worth getting it if it can send back. Yeah. So yes,
You're right, you do make a more conscious choice.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it's become my need. I mean, it's the
You
Vinted.
feel good about it.
Yeah, because I bought this dress.
There's also other like different platforms as well, like there's like Thrift Plus and others, which were actually by buying, you're also donating to charity, so you can get a
encourage also
Feel good
local organizations doing that.
That's a very, very expensive thing that you're never going to get rid of.
Yeah.
One really beautiful thing that's been made by Theo sales, somebody that has put their lifeblood into, and
You were asking about the t-shirt.
Yeah.
So I said the t-shirt of mine is it's so you can be mindful in where you sort of find things from as well. It's from T-Mill, which
From where, sorry?
T-Mill
T-Mill?
Revenue is the organisation behind it, but they basically do like it's all organic cotton that essentially at end of life I've got a little QR code that I'll scan and I'll send it back and it will get shredded up and turned back into cotton and made into a new t-shirt. So actually knowing that the thing you're buying is actually not going to go to landfill, but it's going to go around in a full loop, and they partner with different brands through their T-Mill store to basically produce stuff. So this is like a Tiny Divine t-shirt that's through their T-Mill thing, but it's just that idea of being conscious and and again, it all costs money, right? So you don't have to pay for your beliefs. So that's why I'm saying find the thing that works for you in terms of where you find your clothing and what and I should say total ban on clothing, but I think it is baby steps. We are in a very consumer oriented world.
I think to pick up on what you were not saying,
Okay.
I want to but if you are about locally, we have a swap shop where you can bring your own clothes and swap with us, makes things 50% less, so you get the spirit fibre, and then also pick up on your ID. Like I get that we don't have the option to sort of lie in bed and just sort of buy things, but at the same time, if you come in and you take something home that you just either it doesn't fit or there's something up, or that you just don't like it anymore, we would much rather that you brought it back and then it went back into our system and just swapped it for anything in the store.
And I do think there's something about like the in the real world stores and about really turning it into an experience. And I think that is such a big part. So I think people have got in their heads that charity stores are a particular way or the clothes are a particular thing. And I think that is actually really changing. And having stores like yourself, which have multiple elements to make the experience, they can get fit to work. It does make a difference. So I think find your connections and find the things that give you value and joy.
Like we looked at and analysed some of the issues with the sort of the very common charity shop model is that there's just simple things like no question there is a charity shop smell. You smell it as soon as you go in. And we made it a very, very strict decision that nothing, and the thing that smelled nearly always comes from old leather and old sheepskin. So unless they are in like amazing nick, they don't go in. Every single item, like there's nothing, like we even see it on some secondhand sellers online and they'll put something on and it's crumpled. It's just like, put an iron over that, or a steamer. So we make sure that every item has been stained beautifully. It's been sprayed with a lovely sort of fresh linen scent. All the hangers are matching. We've changed a lot of those kind of cues that people get whenever they walk into a more traditional charity shop model. The idea that we wanted to make, because we're not for profit as well, and soon to be full registered charity, the idea of making everything a tenner meant that we there may be a coat that's made by like an all-weather coat, like a regatta type thing, that somebody can buy for £10. It's going to keep them warm and dry, no question it will. But to go to somewhere that is a more cheaper budget high street brand, you're not going to get a coat for tenner, no matter where you go, unless you get it on the sale reel in March when it's no longer any good to you. But if you buy it in October, November, whenever you need it, there's a very high chance it's not going to keep you warm, it's not going to keep you dry, and it definitely isn't going to give you next season and the season after that. But you pay more than £10 for it, for sure. So the idea of our swapping service as well means that actually if somebody has, as we all do, we say that 30% of our wardrobes are made up, and it probably is a bigger number than that realistically, of clothes that we've either never worn or we've only worn once. We intend to wear them again, but we never do. So what we would say to people now is take that 30%, everything you don't want anymore at all, whether from something that still has the labels on it, right through to a pair of pajamas that have a hole in the arse that are ready for the bin. But don't put them in the bin. That's what we say. Bring us everything and we'll give you swaps for the things we can swap for. Everything else will either go into our free store and be given completely free of charge, because people that are using the services of charities also want that dopamine hit. That's why we've made our free store to look like a shop. You know, so people can go in and things are on hangers, and they're also steamed, and they also smell beautiful, and they're also matching. And the idea is that people can still experience those dopamine hits, whether they're in the swap shop and they're buying, or whether they're in the free store and they're getting it free because they're coming in with a charity. That you can still get that feeling of that little like retail therapy, you know, but without necessarily causing any harm, especially. And so, you know, some people just are not comfortable with the idea of not outfit repeating, for example. But say, Kate, you wanted to come in and bring in your sparkly dress. You could, in theory, bring back the sparkly dress that you got last week, wear it, wash it, bring it back in, swap it for another sparkly dress. You could have a different sparkly dress every Saturday night for $5 every single week. So that's, rather than going against the tide of saying, no, stop doing that. That's not for everybody. For some people that just need, because it's their part of their job, they want to have a different sparkly dress. We're trying to allow for both of those things to happen. Yeah, you just got to come in, and it's about additional experience at the same time, because you get calmer.
Do you think we're drowning in stuff though? Do you think that is maybe
No
part
question.
of our mental health issues? I just
Yeah.
think we're overwhelmed by maybe the, you know, bombardment of brands, but we're also drowning. You know, our bedrooms are aching. You know, people are paying for places, you know, these places like the lockups that they can put their clothes in. And you would be best placed to.
There's a ton of people, we were just talking about this before actually, there's a ton of people that come into us, love them because they give us a lot of stuff, but that essentially have shopping problems. They will have, if it's not every other room in their house that they're not living in, it's a storage facility. It's people that because we've been in and out of all sorts of spaces trying to run our project.
We're not judgmental, we're easy people to tell. You know?
Oh, no, it's great. And I love that someone feels safe enough to say, actually, I didn't really say this out loud. All this stuff has labels on it. I just thought it all one night. I don't really know what to do with it. I feel incredibly guilty because I'm still getting the same messages of, you know, the environmental destruction and all the rest. But I want to be able to do something with that. I want to be able to at least know that not only is it going to fundraise for you like it would in another charity shop, but it's going to potentially make it onto the back of someone that needs it, rather than just like a lot of the other establishment charities, rather than just dumped. It's just dumped, it's bailed up, they say it's recycled, it's sent to somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa and probably burnt, which is just like,
Huh?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So when you recycle your clothes, a lot of the time,
No, a lot of our local recyclers are very good because we chat with them and have conversations with them. But as you can see in the True Cost, which I believe is showing tomorrow night as part of this series of events as well.
Thursday night,
True Cost, Thursday night, and also another documentary called Dead White Man's Clothes. That's what, like, people are buying clothes sold as seen type thing, opening a bale and finding that nothing is wearable or useful, and then they're being burned for fuel, or they're clogging waterways and environmental spaces on the other side of the world.
Disrupting their own textile
Yeah.
industry. You know,
Yes,
there's a lot of creative
yes.
people out there that you know, could be making
Exactly.
a good living, but there's
Like
with
Tom's.
our stuff, with
Mhm.
our stuff, and we are completely ruining their ability to, you know, create their own employment and support themselves as well. You know? So
that's actually a really big issue. Is the people who send their, you know, be it African missionaries or whatever, or a Tom's type model, people who 1 for 1 buy something and something goes to someone, or they just drop it off at their church or their charity or whatever it is. They're flooding those communities, and it's meaning, like you were saying, that the local shoemaker no longer has a job. Everyone's got shoes. Everyone's got someone else's shoes. The traditional fabrics that have been made forever, the skills have been passed down, that they're being lost, you know, because someone's just got a t-shirt that says, God knows what.
Alongside greenwashing, we have to be really aware of charity washing. You know, like, it's really, really important that as, you know, people here, we
Do no harm, take no
do no
shit.
harm, take no shit. That's our mantra, you know, and it's like, we have to, but even whenever we first started making these t-shirts, you know, like Rap Nui, these have got the GOTS standard, they've got the vegan accreditation, they've got all those bits on it. But now, as we sort of delve closer and closer into it, we realize actually we can probably do without these now. You know, we're in a very different world now. But I think that it's one takeaway I would love people to have is understanding that there are charities, there are social enterprises, there are organizations out there that purport to take your money because you think that they're going to do something good with it. Beware, they're not all doing something good with it, particularly not on a global scale. You know, there's a lot of charity t-shirts that were made that are talking about issue. There's like t-shirts that maybe have like LGBT issues on them that were made in a country where it's where it's illegal to be gay. You know, there's things like that as well. So I would say examine, just particularly with things like anything to do with greenness in the H&M world, labels being actually the thing that's recycled, nothing else being recycled, you know, things like that. But I watched that True Cost documentary that's coming up. I think that's like a really good, if somebody just wants like a one-shot deal to kind of give them like a good baseline as to what that's like, you can ask for anything about it, watch, but it's on YouTube as well.
Where is
True
it being
Cost.
shown then?
Here,
In the room just across the way on Thursday nights. I think it's roughly 6:30 start, so that's a great opportunity for people to learn more. Not that we haven't learned enough from here today, we've learned a lot from this already, but it's a wider look at the fast fashion industry across the globe, and it's got a lot of key people in the fashion industry who have a lot of experience in it as well, and know a lot discussing the issue too. So we really encourage people to come down to that.
Do they need to sign up in advance or anything, or is it just a case of just
We
go?
do have tickets available, but we're more than happy for people to come down as well on the night. But it's just that so we know numbers so we can cater for everybody.
So queue Thursday night.
Yes.
Brilliant.
but it's in, back to what I said at the very beginning, it's in, I love when you push this, by the way, just sort of sidebar, it's brilliant. But
Just
it's,
my mind is blown.
it's just, these things very rarely actually feel like a conversation, and it really does, it's really very good. But just what I was saying about taking that information on board, it's also having integrity within yourself to see something like True Cost, or for the vegans, it's Earthlings or whatever it is, and to not forget it the next day. And it's not that you know, it's hard to change the world, but you can change your perspective and your world within it. And you can, in the words of Gandhi, you know, love him or hate him, you can be the change you want to see in the world. And it's taking that on and then just putting it into practice, and not being under the pressure. Same with veganism or being veggie or whatever. You know, if you want to have a Malteser, you have a Malteser. If more of us do it imperfectly, then it will still be moving forward. You know, so you can still slip and see a gorgeous dress in the window of H&M and just think, I deserve that. You know, but then at the same time wear your Vinted and your bits and your swaps and whatever else.
Like the vegetarian or veganism is a good kind of comparison, because well, you also get called the woke police every time you talk about it, or you know, you get
don't talk
heavily
about
judged.
it.
We never talk about it, like ever. But it does make that good comparison, and it's I think I said to Caroline earlier on there. Our friend Emily said to us once, that really stuck with us, it takes more of us to do things imperfectly, just to make a small change, than it does for a few of us to do something really militantly. Because the militant ones are the ones that people go, ugh, I'm not going to do all of that. I'm just going to have 2 steaks now because whatever, you know, like there are people like that, though it's mad, but there are. But if you know, like I'm not saying don't buy anything from these shops, but it's more like a, you know, consider, do you need all of these things? Only buy, it's like, do I need it? Will I use it? You know, or the what, where, what, how, what, when, where, why. It's like just be a wee bit more considered, you know, especially coming into Christmas as well. It's not just about clothing, it's just about stuff. You know, like, can you buy somebody, or can you and other relatives club together and buy somebody a really beautiful, locally made scarf, or, you know, an experience or something like that, that isn't just like a load of plastic crap without really any thought behind it, you know, just to get a multiple. You know, it's like less is more, you know, and local is, it's that thing that shares on Facebook. You know, if you buy something local, somebody does a wee happy dance whenever you buy it. You know, nobody cares if you buy like a big multinational, they don't care. But you know, balance it. But you can still buy your crackers from wherever that place is. Just try and be a wee bit more mindful. Nobody's perfect, but just maybe make a few more conscious decisions in your purchasing. That's, I suppose, all we can do.
And turn it off. You know, unfollow those bloody brands. Follow more artists.
Follow us
Follow
at
us.
Another World Belfast.
But it's like I'm not really a massive consumer. I don't really get it. I never really have, because I'm perfect. Like, but no, I remember for years. I remember all the things about the Kardashians. Like they really, like, they hate them or hate them. They have destroyed the planet and our mental health and everything else, or society in general. But I remember watching, thinking, rather than from the perspective of, I really want to know how these guys live, more like, I want to know what that program is, how they film it, what parts are real and they're not, how do you convey a message, because they're experts at that. And I remember getting really hooked for a while I was traveling for a while and I was backstage with folks. I was like lying on the sofa, just drinking probably Diet Coke, watching this program, and I was like amazed. I feel like I haven't seen TV in a long time. There was an episode where Chris, who's the mum, talks about her earlobes and how they were starting to get longer and how that was making you feel, how that's a real signifier that you're old. You're like, my earlobes.
Everybody's
Just go ahead.
It's the part of influence, because ever since then, when I should have a little moment where I want to, I'm much better at standing in front of the mirror and really loving myself. But when I have a wee moment where I'm just like, ugh, you're awful haggard, you're tired of it. Someone will come up to you in the street and go, you're awful tired, are you tired? And you're like,
Never tell anyone they're tired.
I'm tired. But when I have one of those days and I get home and I look in the mirror, I swear I go to my earlobe and I think, very long. You know, I never would have thought of it before. You never would have thought of those bloody boots or those new bags or whatever it is if you wouldn't have signed up to see the stuff. You know, that I feel like I'm shouting at you now.
No, I'm taking it all on board. I think Facebook I'm completely out of, thank goodness. But Instagram, just because I have to be on for work.
Sure.
If I didn't have to, because I had to share the story that you did tonight of me kicking, and I have to kind of do it, but I do it in a very limited amount of social, and I don't really share anything that's personal. It's all kind of like work stuff and cats. But it just sucks you in, and then if I looked at my screen time, you know that you can look and see how many hours you've been on each app. It's dangerous. My 4th time app was vintage. I would now become obsessed with it and face my other things. But anyway, because I think it's about 7:45, so I want to kind of throw it back up on the floor and see, but now about 15 minutes
I
left.
have one. So yeah, I didn't get the chance to say, but just to agree with everybody, but I wanted to share. So in terms of what I would have said would be just unfortunately to have to say, if you're going to buy new, to try and do a bit of research into the companies that you are buying for. And so I have kind of a list that I keep beside me in terms of want to do a bit of research, not just about fashion, but all sorts of other businesses. So what I did is like I wanted to share that with people. So just while I had some forced labor in my kitchen this afternoon with my husband. So what I had is, for everybody who wants one, and you're not obliged to take one, but it is a list of some really helpful websites. So Ethical Consumer is on it. It's really good. Rap's top of the list. And Ethical Consumer, the Restart Project, which focuses on repair cafes, which are amazing. And some links from Queens, because I knew that I should do a bit of promotion for Queens there. Common Objective is really good. So at the top it says, don't ditch it, stitch it. And inside every one is a little needle and a thread and 2 tiny buttons. And so you could keep this to hand, and next time your button falls off or you get a tiny rip, go on YouTube, and there are some wonderful resources in terms of stitching. So I've committed to do this myself. These are the websites that I really rely on. At the bottom I've said reduce, reuse, repair and recycle. So I'll throw these at the back there. So if anybody wants a bit of inspiration and trying to remember things, I
That's
have.
amazing. I thought that was a box with business cards in it that you were
No, I
going to-
wouldn't. I couldn't.
I'm so
And then
impressed.
so
I couldn't bring myself to put out a business card. I couldn't bring myself to put our website on it, but I've got the Queen's website on it. So yes, my husband stuck all of these videos on them. So if anybody wants some helpful resources.
Can I just say that we're doing something, students don't know about this, maybe you do, Lily, I don't know, but we're going to do something on the 15th, the last Thursday, week 12, which is, you know, our semester. You're all very welcome to bring your needle and thread.
Bring your needle and
We're
thread.
going to have something like 20 meters of fabric in the new BC area of Ulster University in the foyer, and we're going to be mending ourselves and repairing ourselves as a metaphor for mending the world. So they've started already. There's been coffee spilt. I'm going to bring wine in, and we're going to be fixing up and mending 20 meters of fabric. So you're all very welcome to come along, and we're going to be doing a little darning and patching and beading and everything. So we're going to have workstations. Siobhan has kindly supported that as well from Live Here, Love Here. So you're all very welcome. It's about us all joined together, and having that learning, passing skills is very important. But there's also you know, power in making, isn't it? There's a thing of, you know, feeling ourselves as well. We start to make and I think that's really important. Start to make.
And one thing, I mean, I can sew and all that, but there's so much said to have a tailor, and you can't get, I mean, you know, even like dressmaking or something, sometimes you might not teach whatever you have fit properly, or maybe you've lost weight or you put on weight, and you just need an alteration, and it's very hard to find. I mean, I do this, but like, I mean, not bad, but that the missing of dressmakers and tailors. I mean, this would be something when if we would get them some more back.
There are some, and they're just emerging, and I've forgotten the name of them right now, but basically, there are some emerging apps which link you to your nearest repairer. So you can sort of put in your location and what it is you need. So it's just escaped me entirely. I'll come back in a bit of a broadcast.
That's a good
you.
model.
But yeah, but basically, Google it. You'll find it. There's a couple of different repair services now which are being offered, and they'll even come and pick it up from your doorstep and bring it back to you. So I mean, if you repair something, you generally keep it for 1.3 years longer, according to our research, and that really cuts your carbon
There's even
footprint.
zips and jeans.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe some people can't fix up the zip and jeans.
I know.
But they
Oh,
can't.
I mean, I'm back
They
to
can't,
six.
yeah, they can't.
but-
It's, we've lost these skills. So actually, the repair companies and all of those things are fantastic for that. But standing on it.
You send us the link if you remember
I
it,
will,
then
yes.
we'll put it on our social media for anybody that follows.
I'll come back. Sorry.
Do you do the job of that app that like sort of hyper for us? There's a lovely group of grannies
Oh,
that
yes.
are facing us on White Tavern Street. They're in Smith Bay.
They love colour.
They, I have a serious like a magnetic attraction to grannies. Or just old people, just they can sit all day. And I think the same works the other way. It's sort of like somewhat camp sort of men. But they're very sweet. And there's those people and those businesses that are all over the city. It's just kind of opening your eyes for them. It's knowing that you come into the Ulster and 10 Foundations or another charity shop, grab something, and then take it there, and for next to nothing, have it fitted, or having just the right maybe length on the leg or whatever. But it makes a big difference.
Can I just make a point? What you said about advertising, I don't think we take it that seriously, like we underestimate the effect it has, because like advertising, like audiovisual and print advertising has been around for like 75 to 80 years, but no education system in the world teaches how to respond to advertising. And for the past decade or so, I think Laura will be able to like expand on this a bit more because she took a class on surveillance consumerism. So it is like they use a concept called growth hacking. And in all social media applications or in all commercial merchandise applications, they use a concept called growth hacking. So I won't get into the technical jargon. So what they do is basically they create an artificial intelligence copy of the user. And that is how they predict what we're going to buy. And this is what escalates sales. Like, so I was looking at the statistics. 1950s is when advertising started escalating. And during 1950s, the average spending of a person on fashion was 30% of his income. And he owned around 5 kilograms of textile for a very year. On this day, the spending is only 5% of the average income. But a person owns around 28 kilograms of clothes. He purchased around 28 kilograms of clothing in the course of an entire year. So that's almost 1/3 of a person's average weight in the UK. So, and this has been in parallel, concurrently with how advertising has progressed. And the way that this growth hacking system operates is how mass psychology is controlled. And I know it sounds like a science fiction, but it has been around there for quite some time, because we've seen like election results being manipulated by data from companies like Cambridge Analytica. And it is very appalling to me that the general public, and particularly school-going students or university-going students, are not taught how to respond to advertising. Because there was a time when everybody wanted to be the Marlboro man, because that's how cigarettes were advertised. It's a sign of masculinity. Right? It is only when government intervened and started giving like cancer headlines that smoking causes cancer and everything. But
it's amazing. Even color theory. I teach color theory to our students, and Fanta, putting yellow, more yellow makes people think it's more lemony. So there is something about the psychology of colour and
Yeah,
psychology, yeah, we totally underestimate. But maybe there's a new business opportunity for somebody to start business and how to counteract the effects of false advertising. Because yeah, you look at Cambridge Analytics and Carol Cadwalder and the work that she did, and it nearly killed her when she was trying to tell the truth, because we're now living in a generation with so much information that's misinformation, and we don't know the truth from a lie. And that's and that's probably part of our mental health disease as well.
Not even just misinformation, like when we talk about like consuming more fashion than we actually need, like artificially enhancing our propensity to consume.
Yeah.
Even if it is not like, let's say, illegal, well, it raises a huge question on whether it's ethical, and it like poses a huge threat.
But it's kind of misinformation, because it's saying you're going to feel better, or
Yes.
you're going to look better,
Right.
or whatever. And when
Exactly,
none of those things happen,
that is
it's a lie, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
It's actually a lie.
But Instagram has made us do that to each other.
Yeah.
Almost outfit of the day and influencers and
And all the
you know,
apps, I don't know
hustle
what,
economy.
make yourself thinner and whatever.
Like, I think there's, like, you'll never get to me. As a former, like, I'm gonna out myself, I've done this a few times, but I used to, when I lived in England, I used to vote Conservative. I was a capitalist, I earned lots of money, and I remember saying to my ex-husband at one point, he was asking who do the voting and things. I said to him, oh, well, obviously we vote Conservative, we don't want to vote Labour, like, they're gonna take all your money off you. You know, like, that was me, and I couldn't be further away from that now. And as a society, we champion the individual, we don't champion collective thinking, we don't champion society, you know, we don't look after each other, like, which is inbuilt into us. You know, it's like we are social beings and we strive for connection and we strive for love and happiness and all of those things. And a lot of the things that were being put in front of us, and like, let's call it what it is, the people who see more of it and are more susceptible to it because they maybe haven't had the opportunity to learn about things like critical thinking and analysis and all the rest of it, is those that haven't been through third level education and things like that. So arguably that is the huge majority of our society. And if we can, everything comes down to how we vote, everything comes down to what systems are in place to protect us, to protect our family, to protect, you know, young people coming up through the world. And never underestimate the power of power and the power of greed and status. And that is what is currently in control of our governments in many Western countries at the minute. The way that we can start to fight back and bring change and take care of each other and make sure that there is still an earth to live on in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, is to vote differently and start to think of collective thinking. And that means, and it is not a dirty word, we need to just like research it and understand how the media has attacked this word, but it is in terms of socialism. You know, socialism is not communism, it's a completely different thing. Democratic socialism allows us to build systems, to build universal services, to build universal basic education, to protect people first. And if we look at the trends within the UK at the minute, they're trying to push away through Brexit things like human rights laws, you know, like we're pushing things in the wrong direction, and that is, make no bones about it, because of money, status, power, and greed. So think about how we collect, how we protect each other, collect and protect the earth. And then it comes through to advertising and fashion too, in terms of how we vote and what we do. So that's
Something I either read or heard recently was just saying, you know, with all the advertising, I'm worried about people who study this and they know a lot more about this than me, but there was I think it's just there's a pattern to selling, and it sort of goes along the lines of you know, first you get to buy more of something because you know you need that thing, that particular thing, and then if you've got a wee bit more money, it's well buy two, because you know you need a brown pair of shoes and you know a black pair and maybe that like colour ones, you sort of buy more of the same thing, and then once you've done selling all of that, then the next level it goes to is buy the thing that's different, the designer, the one-off, the sustain, whatever it is, it's like buy the different. So it's like this pattern of selling that's just sort of keeps going. And like once you sort of see it, it's in food, it's in everything, it's just all there. And for me, it's just like, do you know what? Once you start seeing that and you're going, do I really need that? No, I don't. That's part of this selling into me that I need another color, I need another particular
Micro,
you know, it's like, yeah, or I need this particular thing because, you know, I'm going to feel out of place and I don't really want to feel out of place or whatever it is. Once you start to see those patterns, it's like, it just sort of, you've got the choice as to whether you stop or whether you keep going with it, whether you opt out of the system or whether you know, carry on clicking through. And it, you know, as I said, baby steps, and maybe that's the wrong expression, but it is something about, because, you know, as it's perfect, it's not about being perfect, it's about just making a start. I think that's what we do.
All changes.
Yeah, big differences.
Anybody else, any thoughts before we wrap up? It's almost late. Anybody, any more questions? Time for one more point.
One just that I have something that many things are, you know, like cost and prices and all the rest of it. There's a lot of chat about economies and it's all these like brands that boost economies and places like here. And but yet drastic change is needed to take away those fast fashion brands and all that to kind of work towards the net zero that we need for obviously having and all the rest of it. Generally, politicians tend to favor economy over sustainability. Is there any thoughts on whether or not that's actually possible to move towards a circular economies and things like that, or how that can be shifted, or just
So we've done a bit of research in RAP about what the potential of the circular economy is in terms of reducing our climate impact and in terms of actually sort of contributing to the you know, to jobs and to the economy. And we don't think it's sustainable. We just passed the 8 billion people mark on the planet. It's not sustainable that everybody buys the same amount of stuff and keeps buying. So the circular economy has to kick in terms of, you know, we have to be using resources more sustainably. It has to kick in. We just can't keep doing things the way that we've been doing them. So it makes business sense. It makes sense to governments, and they are coming around to it. They don't like the term circular economy. They like resource use or efficient resource use. We were joking about it earlier, but with the change of government, we became an anti-establishment organisation overnight in terms of our agenda. So I mean, I think there's different things. Yeah, I do think that we can't keep going where we are, and it is starting to make sense to different people for different reasons. I think we'll see the change, but it will be for different drivers. We have to get there because we can't keep going.
And the trajectory we were going in before the pandemic was just the wealth gap was widening. My students there, we looked at some graphs a few weeks ago in the lecture. We were showing what happened after the 2007-2008 financial crisis and the gap between the rich and the poor, including in the UK and the US and many other very wealthy countries. The middle class, the lower middle class, and working class, although those terms are obviously very contested, did not recover financially. The rich were getting richer and the middle class and the poor were getting poorer. So we were on a very, very difficult trajectory before, and that has only got worse. And I would agree, I just don't think it's sustainable to use that word. I just don't think it's sustainable in terms of the model that we are on and the path that we are on.
In terms of textiles, I think that, you know, we will see a change definitely, and I think it's not fashion. Maybe that's going to drive that. I wrote a project for COP26, which was around circular economy and natural fibre composites, actually, because they are textiles. And I think textiles should be a foundational industry and recognised by Invest in I as such. And I think that could bring loads of new employment. And really interesting, they were telling me something like 85,000 people are unemployed at the moment who could be employed, and that's with 5 billion to Northern Ireland. How fantastic if they were in these industries that would be, you know, well paid, but good skills. But recently, because of the new legislation that you were talking about, the carbon can't go to landfill without it being a cost. So all of the companies that are making composites, and we have quite a few of them here in Northern Ireland, are suddenly going, oh my goodness, how do I make a textile that's non-waste and that's going to be recyclable or biodegradable? So I can see a real shift. I've worked with a lot of different companies trying to bring resolution to some of those issues, and it's quite exciting. I think we're on the cusp of something quite exciting, actually. That will hopefully then impact on us as well in the countries that we've left. I think there is absolute massive hope, and I think that has to change for all the things that have been outlined.
There's a circular economy strategy that's been worked on in Northern Ireland at the moment, and textiles is a living stream within that, which I'm really excited to get. There's things to, I mean, it's bleak, but there's glimmers of hope coming.
Yeah, but the big drivers are driving engineering, building, you know, they're the areas that are really driving it. And there's some fantastic innovations that I think lots of students will, you know, these jobs aren't here at the moment, but they will be moving into those because creativity drives the economy. It's the fastest growing sector, even though I don't know why they're saying it doesn't. And my daughter, she's a writer, and she'll say, well, if we don't have the, you know, the creativity and that side of life, what's worth living for? You know, if you can't go to the theatre and buy nice clothes and do all the things or whatever, or, you know, do that side of things that we want to live, read books, whatever.
We're working on a report at the minute that's actually looking at the green skills and green opportunities within the textile sector and globally. So some of the jobs which maybe have been in other different industries and how they're going to transfer into the textile sector. So that could be whether that's digital support or whether that's the engineering roles which are going to transfer across. So there's definitely like
It's a lot of problem solving, isn't it? There's a lot.
is creating
Students like to, you know, I think designers, makers, whatever, you know, you want them to bring us those resolution, don't you, to the problems. I think problems to solve. There's enough to go around. Yeah.
We'll be here all night. It's such a, I feel like that the time just absolutely flew. Have you guys anything to say just before we close?
I think it could be a bit overwhelming, even in like final responses. There's a lot to take in, but if you that's a bit much. Just approach one thing at a time. You know, for you, maybe switching off your social media, and that's your bit. Or it could be for another person approaching a local organisation because you feel overwhelmed and actually you want to just have an impact and you want to learn a bit more, sort of one-to-one. I think stop spending your money if you've got it right now on new crap and actually go out and buy a ticket to a rave if it still bloody exists. Like your friends' faces, walk past that man at 7 in the morning covered in glitter, thinking, where the fuck have I just been? You know, make those connections and know that there are communities, if that's for you, that's for you. There's communities out there, be it creative or otherwise, that are ready to embrace you. You know, you don't have to wear something from Shein or wherever else to impress those people. And in fact, if you're trying to impress the people that are most impressed by your new craft are probably not the people you want to have around you, you know?
And in terms of what you were saying about politicians and politics, there are some a new wave of politicians coming through the rankings. You know, I'm not going to name them because we're a non-partisan organisation, but I can speak about it like the likes of Mary Black. You know, there are people who are able to speak really powerfully about like real issues, and those people, particularly those young people, give me real hope. You know, like you guys give me real hope. Like the people that come into our shop, you know, the people that we engage with online. There is a hope and there is a reason to keep trying, not just to give up.
Well, I think from my point of view, I feel like the door has been opened a little wider tonight in terms of I knew there was something I needed to pay more attention to, but it was a case of I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I need to just read more and involve myself more and in some way pass on to other people, you know, through whatever way. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Alison. Thank you to Kathryn, to Laura, to Becky, and to Connor. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you to your attention, your participation, and your interest in the topic. And thank you to Belfast City Council and Queen's University for hosting. And again, to guys, thank you to the panelists for taking time to inform and inspire us. I have learned a lot, and I shall now go forth and turn off the. Thank you, everyone.
very much.
Thank you. Yes, I did. Yes,
Yes,
it's a
it's
little.
a little-
Thank you so much. This was such an amazing update.